Thank you so much for staying with us on this Thursday edition of Live at 7. Now, the many instances of vigilante justice over the past few months have forced the country to stop and take stock of what's happening with our people. Why are we so angry? Several weeks ago, we explored that issue on Live at 7, seeking some answers. However, this evening, we want to flip the coin and look at the other side of the issue. We don't often stop to ask ourselves, who are the victims of vigilante justice? These are the victims who are easily forgotten. Sometimes they get no justice. Live at 7, Caneel Gale spoke with two families whose breadwinners were killed by an angry mob. Let's hear from them now inside the story.
Mobs descend on their victims, meting out justice the way they know how, vigilante style. The obvious victims of vigilante justice are those who are killed. But the unknown victims are those left behind, family members left mourning the loss.
Lay down, my dear brother, lay down and take your rest. I wanna lay.
Bernella Brown sits in her house the night before she buries her son Michael. Michael was beaten and stabbed to death by an angry mob in St. Catherine after an accident. She remembers her son as a quiet, calm, ambitious person. Michael was a teacher, just like his mother, and that's why Bernella Brown says they shared a special bond.
My son, my brother, he was my confidant, my prayer partner. He was everything.
She remembers talking to him minutes before the incident.
I was at home, I talked to him about maybe at about 6:45. I was coming home from work. And I had the urge just to call him. When I called him, he said he was on Old Harbour Road coming home. He was finished and I didn't see him. So I was saying that since he was on Old Harbour Road, he should be home by then. So I was there calling his phone, no answer. Every time I call the phone, no answer.
By then, Michael had already met a tragic fate. Accepting that her son is gone forever is difficult for Bernella Brown. The first few days after his death were the hardest.
The night was hell. The other days were hell. Eternal hell. That I went to Old Harbour one day and I had to just go into a doctor's surgery. It was hell and it is still hell.
Her church brothers and sisters gather at the house the night before the funeral to pray for her strength. Though comforting, the songs won't keep the many questions at bay.
I am so angry. First I asked God why. Right? I knelt down on my knees and I said, God, why? Why? Why no? Why no? You know? And why Michael? The reason why I'm angry to know that he wasn't sick. He didn't crash and died. He was coming home from work. And was, mobbed and killed in that brutal manner. And at the same time in the area that he works. Nobody was there to say have mercy.
As the questions linger with no answers forthcoming, Bernella Brown says the hardest part of dealing with Michael's death is knowing that she's burying her son and not the other way around.
These mob killings just keep on going and taking away innocent lives, and family members are left mourning. I don't know. It's my one son, my only son.
I wanna lay your head upon your Savior's breast.
I am going to miss most not having him to talk to, not seeing him around, not hearing him laughing, not coming inside my room and saying, Mommy, giving me a kiss and say, I cannot kiss you when you are dead. I have to kiss you now.
Lay down my...
Just like Bernella Brown, the family of Donovan Hazel is still trying to cope with his murder. After a tragic incident unfolded in Trelawny where two young boys were found dead in the Martha Bray River, An incensed mob suspecting foul play and believing they knew the boy's alleged killer launched their own manhunt, descending on a house in the community craving blood. Not finding the man they thought was guilty, the mob decided that his stepfather and sister was just as guilty. The mob attacked both individuals, hacking Donovan Hazel to death. His daughter escaped, but not before being chopped several times. Fearful for their lives, the family fled the community and the parish. Still afraid, they refused an on-camera interview, only agreeing to speak via telephone. Donovan Hazel's wife is still trying to understand what happened.
Well, it's very difficult, very, very difficult. Because, you know, that my husband was a breadwinner for my children and even for me. Because, you know, when things are low, my husband is always there for us. And so these things and tragedies to happen, very, 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 very sad. And we are facing very satisfaction. Because right now, I'm sure that people can get back to the back to school right now. Because all my things that are possessing life, these unscrupulous people come and take away from us.
Beneath the ash and rubber here are memories. Memories treasured by the Hazel family. The family spent years building a home here, but all of that changed in an instant of vigilante justice. The Hazel family owned the house which was torched in Trelawney. Now they're forced to rent a house in the new parish they're calling home, starting over, rebuilding their lives.
Well, that process is very, very hard because we lived there from 93. And living there from 93 among the residents in the area, we live at a normal life as anybody else. Every day we get up to go about our daily business, my children go to school, and all of that, and all of us study. But this tragedy to happen, it's very sad. And you know that I lived there over many years. And somebody just coming in. As I say, unscrupulous people because they didn't think before they happened.
The man the mob went looking for was Donovan Hazel's stepson. The death of his stepfather weighed heavily on him initially, but he's slowly dealing with the situation.
If something like this going to happen, it's really touching to know say something like this happen. Most of the family, them, my stepfather family side, them say yes and me make what happen. But for the next point, I'm not going to blame myself because them people, them just dark and fool. And the foolishness make them come do what them do. So I'm not going to blame myself that me make this happen.
He says the incident has cost him his job. Meanwhile, Donovan Hazel's daughter, who was seriously injured in the mob attack, is still nursing a broken arm. She says along with the many memories of her father stuck in her head, she will also be reminded of him by the many physical scars she has. Scars inflicted the day he was killed. Dealing with losing a loved one is never easy, but these families say they believe losing a loved one to an angry mob is even more difficult.
And someday on the outstairs,
For Live at 7, I'm Keneal Gale.
where my home.
How could you watch a piece like that and not get teary-eyed or even angry? Coping with vigilante justice, the families left behind. We get some advice when we return. Now, if you missed our opening piece, you missed what was clearly a very heart-rending story of families who have suffered at the hands of vigilante justice, done by Canil Gill. Excellent work, Canil. Here's the situation. The obvious victims of vigilante justice are those killed by the angry mob, but the other victims, those not often heard from, are the family members left behind. Relatives who are left to deal with the pain of losing a loved one to an angry mob is not just the death, but the manner in which they die. So how can these relatives better cope with the loss? Here to help us, Andrea Hopwood, Grief Counselor, and Osborne Bailey, Senior Coordinator at the Ministry of Justice's Victim Support Unit. Mr. Bailey, I'm going to start with you because these victims, the left behind ones of whose families die at the hands of mobs, we don't hear about them often. We don't hear about the progress they make or what's offered to them in terms of assistance. Talk to us about what the state does in reaching out.
Well, when you speak of we, I'm glad you differentiate, because for us in the Victim Support Unit, we have to deal with them, and long after the media and those who are informed by the media have left, we have the responsibility of providing them with the kind of support through the various tragedies that are connected. And I say various because the intense sense of loss and sadness and emptiness that comes along with losing a loved one can impact one socially. There is financial issues, there are health issues, there are psychological issues, and there are legal issues related because they may eventually require some kind of a legal services. There is the whole logistics of living life. There are psychological fear. All kinds of issues are connected. We have to find a way, and there are different persons in the family because they don't all deal with issues the same way. We have to find ways of differentiating the different ones and the different categories of issues that are relating to the grief and take them through the process as best as we can.
Is it an easy process to go through, Ms. Hopwood? It can't be. And what are some of the stages that you identify in victims of this particular kind of tragedy?
You know, I'm sort of sitting here just having my own little personal trauma having watched that, and I think one thing we have to understand is this is probably one of the more difficult and certainly one of the most complicated forms of bereavement, of which I don't even think we have addressed at all in this country. What happens is that these people have what they call secondary victimization. They have trauma. They are in a position of feeling a helplessness and a hopelessness, of a position of fear. The world that they knew no longer exists. It has been absolutely turned out. Anything they trust, whether it was the God, because you heard why me, you heard that lady say why me. If there was a God, how could they have allowed this to happen? Trying to understand where communities can come out and turn into vicious animals and turn against your loved one. Not only that, but the fear themselves that they have of their own personal safety. I mean, anything that they believed in, their love of community, their love of country, the judicial system that is supposed to protect you, what is it they now trust? And this is a very, very complicated grief, and it's very, very long in any sort of resolution, and coming to accountability and understanding the whys. That mother there will spend the rest of her life trying to work out in her mind an answer as to what happened that makes sense to her.
The anger, Mr. Bailey, clearly it's there. I mean, you listen to that piece and you hear people, as Ms. Hopwood said, say why. But that's not the only issue, though. How do we help them to cope? Because otherwise, doesn't it become a cycle?
Oh, sure. Remember, from where we sit and in dealing with it within the context of victim support and having dealt with hundreds, thousands of persons going through this, I personally am of the opinion that grief is perhaps one of the purest expression of love. And you can actually almost measure some of the connectivity between the persons who have passed with the ones who are grieving, and the different types of connectivity. One of the complicated issues is when you are grieving in the context of a vigilante, in some of the instances, you believe, there's almost a belief that you don't have a right to grieve. Because the people who had caused the death of the person believe that they have a right to take this life.
And they are still angry.
Right. So one of the first things I would say in dealing with it is the recognition that you have a right to grieve. You are in love with someone and they are gone, and you have a right to express your grief in all of the various ways that people express grief. And sometimes they're afraid to grieve, because if you are grieving the loss of someone who other persons feel have no right to live, you might be afraid. You notice they say they have to be moving out of their community and they have to do things to protect themselves instead of grieving. And one of the first things I want to say is that people who are grieving their loved ones in these situations, they have a right, like everybody else, to express their grief. There's no boundaries that should prevent them from saying, I have lost someone I care for. And yes, there are fears, but they have a right.
Tell me this, though, because this is one of the particular challenges. There are some persons who stay within the community and who, for some reason, it may not refer to these particular cases that we examined, but does the Victim Support Unit work any at all with the communities in helping them to understand and accept what it is that they have done that is wrong?
There are several things we do. In some contexts, we really need to allow the police to come in and to do what needs to be done from police. However, in many torn communities by this kind of a vigilante community conflict and justice, it requires also some kind of a restorative approach, some kind of a mediation, some kind of a bringing the parties together at various stages. To allow them to at least air some of the concerns and the fears and the realities they've had, some of the causal factors. Because what we have found is that some of the factors in vigilante justice is not even connected to the persons who have just died, been killed. These are long-seated incidents of other things that are dynamics that are happening in communities, and for those reasons we have had to bring communities, persons together to look at it. But certainly,
does it help?
Oh yes, because it's a long process.
Who it helps? The victims? I mean, after I've lost a loved one, how is that going to help me?
Let me tell you how it helps. On the day how we see the help, on the day closest to the loss, when you can see the range of emotions and sense of helplessness over time, being transformed into the capacity to at least deal with the issues, we realize that help it makes a difference. When you can help them to differentiate the various areas in which they are grieving, the emotional, identify even the range of emotions, find projective ways to even show them in some graphical way how much of it they are feeling. Help them to see what is happening to them, explain to them the process. I like to think of it of process more than stage. Help them to learn to appreciate their anger, their depression, the sense of wanting to make up for the loss, and these things. Help them to differentiate what we call normal expressions of grief from what I would call negative expressions of grief. Because some of the wanting to become suicidal or even homicidal yourself, differentiate what is okay to do and what perhaps is challenging to do. These are things which does help.
We're a very angry society, Mrs. Hopwood.
We are enraged.
Extremely angry.
It is not anger. We are enraged. We are a country in grief. There is just so much, and it is going back to this particular case. One of the parts of it that I see that complicates it is that in the why question of the accountability of trying to figure out what happened and try to make sense of it. Sometimes in the case you have to start looking through the eyes of the mother or the relative, wondering if they do feel that there was some blame maybe on themselves. It's a if I could I, should I, would I syndrome. What could I have done to have prevented this, and taking the blame on themselves. But worse still in a situation like this is the silence that happens in the community.
And we're going to talk we're going to interrupt you because we're going to talk about that silence on the other side of this break. But if you're watching, ask yourself, what form of justice does mob attacks and killings do? Especially when you hear the voices of the victims left behind. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live at 7. We can barely keep smiles on our faces this evening based on the issue we're talking about, the whole issue of the victims left behind after vigilante justice. No, not those who justice were extracted for, but those who have lost their loved ones as a result. Still ahead, Technology Today with Ramon McLaren. Right now, though, should there be state support for the families of victims of vigilante justice? Let's hear from the streets of the corporate area.
What happens is that some of these persons were probably breadwinners, and what you'll find is that the persons who they would have left behind would have had the problem now of not having a breadwinner. And then what do we necessarily tell them? Is it that we are going to have the slippery slope thing that happens, that their children who become social deviants because they don't have that breadwinner anymore, they have to drop out of school to probably help out because the breadwinner is gone, or things like those?
No, I think that should be the responsibility of the community, because when you have the state paying for the activities of careless citizens, then it means that we are encouraging them to continue this sort of atrocity. If we reach a stage where we say where citizens in a particular area cause suffering on other people, then they should be made to pay for it.
Yes, I think they should, because we as citizens shouldn't take it upon ourselves to do the job of the government or the police. If something happened and we feel angry, we should go to the police, even though sometimes they may not support us, but I don't think it's right for us to take it up with our own hands and go about hurting our fellow brothers and sisters.
And the responses have been coming in on Facebook as well. Calvin says, no, it is just what it is, jungle justice. It is also a deterrent in most places for criminals who know that if they should commit a crime in certain areas and get caught, they could pretty much end up a victim. However, on the flip side, some form of understanding should be agreed on by the state and the family, just like when a police officer shoots the wrong person. Ina says the proliferation of vigilante justice is evidence of a failing justice system. By extension, then the state is partially responsible. The perpetrators should also be made to compensate the families. And this one from Casilia. She says there should be some law or legislation that states that the persons involved in the vigilante act, once caught, should pay up for the damages that they caused. The government has too much on their hands already. And Reedling says yes, because the state has failed to protect its people. And Kayla says, no, because there's no need for it. If the person responsible for the crime is caught by the police, they would go to jail and the family wouldn't get any support if that person was the breadwinner. Same thing if said person was killed by a mob. You know, I won't even make any more comments on it. I'll just read them as they are and leave them there. We pick up our discussion with Andrea Hopwood, grief counselor, and Osborne Bailey, senior coordinator at the Ministry of Justice's Victim Support Unit. They've been helping us understand what the families of persons go through when their loved ones are killed by a mob. Thank you so much for staying with us. Now, we know we were talking about the community issue, but just before we go back to that, Mrs. Hopwood, Mr. Bailey, the financial support, that aspect of it, does a victim support unit have anything to do with that?
In practice, there really is a limitation on government resources to provide financial support for victims that really require it. However, in policy, the government believes, and I see them heading into that direction, we are still working on the Victims Charter and the components of it that has a compensation or assistance element to it. The government believes that the state has some amount of responsibility to all of its citizens. And once they become a victim of a crime, there's an extent to which some amount of financial support. In policy, I want to make it clear because there's no resources to manage this.
So how do they cope now? Because the policy can't eat.
The truth is they cope with what resources they have, and in some instances, through some of the state agencies, there is some support that comes through the welfare assistance programs in the state and so on. However, there's a complication with the state providing with asking communities to provide, because remember, until someone is found guilty, you really cannot hold, and the guilty process may take years. So it is during this time that the state believes it should provide some kind of an assistance, as long as the resources are there, and particularly in case where the person was killed by an agent of the state. The state tries to provide some support there.
And I go back to Mrs. Hopwood because there's a valid point that Mr. Bailey raised, that until someone is found guilty, and this is the other side of the story, that code of silence within the community, and the fact that many of these perpetrators are often not brought to justice. How does that affect the healing process of the persons who have lost their loved ones?
Well, it just creates more trauma, more victimization, to the point that eventually you get to the stage that you become emotionally dead because you've lost everything. You no longer trust anything that is out there for you. You know, we spend some time talking about the effects, which are horrific, and they are very much different than having an aunt that dies or a person who dies of cancer. I mean, this type of trauma and the grieving that goes with this trauma is very different than that death that you've anticipated. And I think one of the things to understand is that, first of all, the code of silence is horrible because quite often people don't know what to say. They may even think that your loved one that was killed was guilty. Whether or not he or she was, is totally immaterial. Therefore, there is a feeling of not saying anything. We won't, you know, in other words, you don't know what to say, so you say nothing.
So you're hurting and you're feeling as if no one is reaching out.
Yeah, so everybody starts to move away and you become more and more isolated and more alone with your feelings. The one thing you do need is you do need the permission to be able to grieve, to be able to let your emotions out safely. In fact, what do you do with this rage? I mean, at the moment now, you're enraged. The things that you believed in no longer exist. What do you do with these feelings? Rage is one of the things, and how do we take this rage and how do we be able to encapsulate it, to be able to express it and relieve it, so that it doesn't once again cause the cycle, because over and over again retaliation.
What's the recommendation you give to these victims, Mr. Bailey?
Well,
because I'm sure they ask you, what we must do? How long is it going to take me to feel better about this?
Let me tell you some of the practical things we have to work through with them. And I'm saying this because each person has different issues they're related to, so some of the issues are different. For one, we realize that the grieving issue is not the only issue going on in people's lives, because life and other components of the life have to go on. So in addition to dealing with the grief, we slowly try to get them to deal with the other issues that are happening, which may be positively happening. So the whole negative sense of everything has died is counteracted by at least there are some things that are happening. I have children, sometimes, hopefully, they have a home, if that didn't go in the process. I have my life, I have friends that I can trust. We help them to differentiate those things that are fact from fiction, because a lot of them just need information. How did it happen? So we can provide them with that kind of information. There are some practical things that needs to be done when someone has passed on. There is the whole burial process. There is the whole dealing with some of the whole legal and other issues. We would walk through some list of what needs to be done, what must be done. There is, when we speak of silence, in one sense, it can be reflected in what we call distance from some things. We can help them to identify where they are going silent, meaning they're not making themselves available to some things, to some places, where they're not as diligent about other things that they could slowly become more diligent in, because the grief process would have shut them down. That's what we call silence. It's not just a silence audible, it's a distance in ourselves. So we can help to reconnect them with things in their lives that they reconnect. The kind of interest that we show in their personal appearance, for example, they recognizing that they need professional support. And a very important thing which we don't want to avoid is the need to at least identify the role of God and to say what they feel about this. A lot of people feel that they have been let down. And a lot of people can get help by reconnecting with their relationship with God and so on. We help them through these various things that are required, depending on where they are in the process and so on.
How do we as a society help this process? Because we seem to turn a blind eye. So, okay, 2 boys were killed and somebody has to be brought to justice. The police moving too slow. So this is what we do. We often forget these people. But what is it that we need to do in our consciousness now to recognize what this act is doing to our communities, to our country?
You've got me there. You know, I think the thing is to be able to have a feeling that there is a judicial system that you can trust and can go to. There is a place that you can go, and when you want to express your feelings, you can do it safely. That we do feel safe, that there are places that we can go, people that we can go that we trust. Because what happens with the locking down of our emotions is that we are left with the basic fight, fear and flee components, and that is all we're left with, our ability to be able to feel. So we need to be able to, the victims need to be able to have a place that they feel safe in, that they can have permission to grieve, that they can express their feelings. The community has got to feel safe, that there is an infrastructure that will protect them. I think this is one of our problems.
Okay, and that's the point on which we'll have to leave it. But I want to thank both of you for enlightening us about the situation, and hope that those of us who've heard the discussion will not forget that there are victims on both sides. All right, thank you both, as I said earlier, for coming. After the break, Technology Today with Ramon McLaren. Welcome back to Live at 7 Thursday. 2 days ago, Barack Obama was re-elected President of the United States. And oh, what a social media event it was. Ramon McLaren is here with the online highlights.
Yes, Jody. 4 years ago, when Barack Obama was first elected U.S. President, he was referred to as the first social media president. This simply meant that this was the first time that social media played such a critical role in a presidential election. This time around, social media was not going to be left out of the Barack Obama celebration. Here's a snapshot of what happened on Tuesday. Hours before most newspaper headlines screamed about Barack Obama's re-election on Wednesday morning, social media was already abuzz with the celebrations. Tweets, Facebook updates, and Instagram pics heralded Barack Obama's second term in office. After the major networks called the election for the president, Barack Obama's official Twitter account sent out a photo of Barack and Michelle hugging, under which was the text that read, "4 more years." That tweet became the most retweeted tweet in history. It took 22 minutes for the president's photo tweet to break Justin Bieber's pre-existing record of 200,000. By the end of the night, Barack Obama's victory tweet was resent over 500,000 times. That victory tweet was followed shortly by another from the newly reinstated president, this time a bit more sober. He tweeted, "We're all in this together. That's how we campaigned, and that's who we are. Thank you. Signed B.O." Which signaled to his 22 million followers that it was a personal tweet from Barack Obama himself and not just a generic one from an aide. Many other U.S. politicians who won Senate and House seats followed that route to announce their victories and thank supporters. This signaled that this kind of short and sweet victory tweet may well become standard for all future election winners. Twitter reported that, as the election was being called, its conversations hit a peak of 327,452 tweets per minute. Congratulating the president is standard practice for other world leaders, but some decided to do it via social media. Great Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron tweeted, "Warm congratulations to my friend at Barack Obama." Not to be left out, the celebrities all started to weigh in. LL Cool J tweeted, "Don't call it a comeback, he's been here for 4 years." The tweet was complemented by an appropriate tweet pic. Social media was also bent on fulfilling its social responsibility on Election Day, as Twitter also offered a guide to Election Day listing of Twitter accounts for the chief election official in each state, so that followers could get regular updates and instant access to party functionaries if needed. Meanwhile, Facebook, in collaboration with Microsoft's Bing search engine, offered a Find My Polling Station link at the top of users' news feeds. Facebook also allowed users to tell their friends when they voted, as the I voted button at the top of users' news feed was used to indicate when you've already cast your ballot. This, Facebook estimated, led to an additional 350,000 people voting. There are several popular Twitter hashtags on Election Day. As the lines curved around blocks in states like Florida, and the electorate became increasingly frustrated, the hashtag Stay in Line started trending as voters used social media to encourage others to stick it out. By the time Barack Obama gave his acceptance speech, the top 10 trending topics worldwide on Twitter were related to the US election. It's undeniable that social media played a critical role in the entire 2012 US election campaign. A report from the Pew Internet and American Life Project found that 22% of registered voters had told their friends which candidate they voted for via a social networking site. 30% said they had been encouraged to vote for President Barack Obama or Republican Mitt Romney via social media, and 20% said they encouraged others to vote through social channels. It's a social media revolution, and the US election confirmed that. Here are some numbers to ponder. A recent survey concluded that 8% of Americans got their political news from online sources. There were 20 million tweets about the US election day, which made it the most tweeted about event in history. Twitter registered some 65,000 political tweets per minute. The hashtag election2012 surpassed 11 million tweets on election day, and over 600,000 election day pics were uploaded on Instagram. So it's back to normal in the world of social media, where the attention now switches to more frivolous topics until the next big thing, of course. Congratulations to President Barack Obama. But personally, I'd like for us to now shift our focus back to more things closer to home. So back to you, Jody.
Did you tweet?
Not at all. I'm not a Twitter or a Facebook person. I'm actually very private. I need to tell these people,
every day he comes in here and talks to us about technology.
No, but that's the thing about technology.
He's not a techie.
Using a website is not technology.
Oh, come on, man. It's hip, it's hop, it's current.
Facebook is still hip?
Yes, it is.
Facebook has got 2000 thing now. This is when it was launched, like 2008.
No, but where you see these elections going in the future, though, if in 2012 we're at the stage where tweets are so popular, social media is having an impact on how people vote. You think the election campaign, you see where they're trying to use it in terms of social media. We saw it even here in Jamaica last December.
Even locally. I think this is the trend because you have to get pure persons at the point of contact, which is now your smartphone. Mm-hmm. That's what they have on themselves. Even now I have my smartphone on me. It's no longer the TV, it's no longer the newspaper. You want to get persons directly where they are. And mechanisms such as Facebook, Twitter, email, these are the channels for the 21st century. So I see it trending.
And you'll be here to watch and tell us what's happening.
And comment.
Thank you so much, Ramon, for that. Interesting piece there. I didn't tweet. I Facebook. I don't care. Anyway, it's time for your calls. 931-5483 or 969-5483. Those are the numbers to call. Both numbers there. Spell it out live. Look, now, we had a very soul-stirring piece at the start of this program. And I don't know about you, but it still left me wondering what kind of society we are when a mistake or an error or poor judgment on someone else's part, in some instances, have left them murdered. And that is what it is. It is murder. And then there are persons who claim that this is some form of justice and that they deserve it. It leaves us as a society creating a cycle of serious anger because you're leaving victims that themselves will want to take or enact some form of justice later on. Michael is on. Michael, good evening. Michael?
How are you, Judy?
I'm good, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, but there's something here in my mind I want to share with you.
Mm-hmm.
On the issue of the violence, okay, you're discussing aspects of it, the vigilante justice.
Yes.
But I want to make a point here, Jody. Do you realize that vigilante injustice and police killing, they are basically the same, you know?
Yes, they are.
They are. But what is very disturbing, Jody, is that in the case of the police killing, these are incidents of hate. They are people.
Michael, lost you there. If you can, please call us back because we're not hearing what you're saying. But what he's trying to point out is that when police act by shooting to kill or shoot and kill, that this is some form of vigilante injustice as well. I don't even know why we call it vigilante justice, because it is not justice. It's barbaric and it is evil. All right, we have Sasha online. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yes, Sasha, go ahead, because I'm not going to tell you to turn on your TV set. All right. We lost Sasha for a little while. If we can, let's get her back. But back to this whole issue of vigilante. And I'm not going to talk about anything else. I'm not telling you can't call and talk about something else, but this is what is on my mind. The other issue, and it's something we never got to delve into seriously, and I'd like to hear from the police force in terms of how they go about investigating this. You'll hear they hold 5 persons. You'll hear probably a few persons are charged. You never hear much, because even in the case of the gentleman who was killed in Old Harbor, what has happened? Somebody out there is guilty of murdering this man. We've heard absolutely nothing. Do we have a caller online? All right, Sasha left us again. So absolutely nothing. And here's a family left grieving with no answers, no details as to what happened. But you know what? It's not just the state that's a problem. It has to be the community that keeps quiet, because we think it's not okay to inform on someone that was trying to defend the safety of the community. Carlene is on. Good evening, Carlene. Carlene?
Hello?
Yes, man, I'm hearing you. Go right ahead.
I lost my son. Hello?
Hearing you, Carlene.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I lost my son, vigilante justice. And I'm grieving for 6 years now.
How you cope?
And I'm grieving for 6 years now. And I mean, as a mother, I'm hurting, and I got no satisfaction.
So there was no justice in the case at all?
Regarding that mother who lost her son while she was coming from work. No justice. And I'm grieving up until now. There is justice. This program is just bringing back all the memories.
All right, Carlene, we want to thank you for that contribution.
Nothing the person going through the situation.
Accept our condolences. It's 6 years, but we know grief like this never really ends. Hi. Tasha is online. Tasha, good evening.
Good night. I have an issue which I would like to speak about. It's about fathers who go to family court for child maintenance. And when you go there, and when you go there, there is no money being paid. And you went back and you take out a warrant. And the warrant is there sitting at the police station. All the information that they give to the police pertaining to the man, nothing has been done about it. So I would like to know what is really the
Did you ask the police why they can't serve the warrant? Or the summons or whatever it is?
Give them the information. Is either some friend and company or some
No,
something.
but did you ask?
Yes,
you
I
ask? And what was the explanation given to you?
They can't see the man.
They can't find him. Find out from the family court if you can find someone else or another police or police station. It's supposed to know somebody personally. I don't know how it works. Or if that failing, call a legal aid clinic and see if they can give you some suggestion on what to do. All right, that's how we wrap things up for this Thursday edition of Live at 7. Tomorrow we settle the score on this question, and I come in just to settle this score. Is lack of sex leading to more divorces? You can vote via text tomorrow and help us settle the score. That much and more taking place right here tomorrow. I'm Jody Brown in the News Watch at 8 is next. Good evening.